We welcome all of you to our Wednesday night Bible study. So tonight we're going to talk about and learn about the importance of fasting and praying. And I'll give you your scripture references as I go on. So why do we need a teaching on fasting and praying? And I think one of the reasons is mainly because fasting is one of the most powerful tools that we have as believers to destroy the enemy, to put our body, our mind, our will, our emotion, basically our soul under subjection, and then also to defeat the power and the works of the flesh. But at the same time, it is, by it being one of the most powerful tools that we as believers have, I believe that it is also one of the most powerful tools that we don't use. It is so underused, if you will, by the body of believers. And the reason why I do that is because it allows the habits, if you will, we allow habits rather, to dictate to us. To dictate to our body, to dictate to our mind, our will, our emotion. If we allow it as believers, instead of we allow the real us, which we know is a spirit man, to rule, we allow our habits, our mind, our will, those different things, to rule over the natural man, to lead us more than the spirit man. So what do I mean by a habit? So most of us know when we fast, when we truly fast, after a short period of time, we start feeling what? Hunger pains. Whether it's on, 7 to 4, and today, is our fast day, we start feeling hunger pains or thoughts in our mind that starts telling us we're hungry. And basically, it's not so much saying that we're not hungry or the thoughts are not real, but a lot of times it's a habit. Habit being we have a routine. For those of us who eat breakfast at the same time, mainly every day, it's a habit. So if we do it every day except for, and I pray we do fast more than our 7 to 4 corporate fast, but if we eat rather every day, but on that Wednesday, 7 o'clock in the morning, most of us probably are not eating at 7 o'clock in the morning, but at 7 o'clock in the morning, we're starving. And again, it's because we have formed this habit of getting up in the morning, whether it's a cup of coffee, whether it's orange juice, a piece of toast, a piece of fruit, or whatever. So our body is used to that habit. So when that habit does not take place, then it does not mean that it's not a hunger feeling, but it's that habit that's taken over. So what we have to do is learn how to break that habit. And learn how to break that habit, how many of you know, have to be done more than 7 to 4 on Wednesday. It takes a little while longer than those few hours, if you will. And those hours are important because this is a fast that God has given unto our leader for us as a body of believers here in obedience to the word to fast collectively or corporately. So it is important that we do that. But in order to break that, in order for us to receive the spiritual blessing and the spiritual empowerment that we so much desire and need from God, we're going to have to do a little more than 7 to 4 on Wednesdays. So no doubt we may be, but it can also be contributed again to the habits and eating at a certain time, but also it's a routine that God wants us to break so that we can get and receive the spiritual blessings and the spiritual empowerment that He desires for us to have. So fasting is the willful abstaining from natural pleasures or desires for a spiritual purpose. It is an act of the will. It is not going to be easy, but it is possible. And the reason why it's not going to be easy is because because the body wants what it wants, and mainly what the body wants, and it needs it, but what the body wants is food. And a lot of times we know that we put a lot of things in our body that the body does not need, but we put a lot of things in our body that our mind and our body desires. So our will is going to tell us, don't continue to do this. But what we have to do is willfully put our body, our natural desires, under the subjection of our spirit. Fasting is also a personal commitment to renounce the natural to invoke the spirit. It will put the real us back in on top or back in control where it belongs, which the real us, as we know, is our spirit. So basically what this means is we are going to put the body under the subjection of the spirit rather than vice versa. So in this season that we are in, this year of God's favor, new beginning, and all the personal and collective or corporate promises that God has spoken to us in this year and this year and in time past, it is past time for us to truly walk and allow our spirit man to rule rather than the natural man. The word says in Galatians 5:16 through 17, "This I say then, walk in the spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusteth or desires what is contrary or opposite against the flesh. Against the spirit. And the spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary one to the other. So that ye cannot do the things that ye would." So what that's telling us is it is possible that we can do, talking about the spirit man, we can do those things that God desires and has empowered us to do. But what we have to do is go against what the spirit is asking us or demanding us to do. So as we begin to walk in the submission of the Spirit of God, we will begin to see the power of God move and work in our lives on levels that we have never experienced before. Fasting is one of the powerful tools that will produce that transfer of power from the natural to the spirit. And again, if we go back to Galatians 5:16, if we continue to have heart issues, works of the flesh, attitudes that are repeatedly seen in our lives, we're talking about believers. We're not talking about the unbelievers or the sinners. But if we're continuously seeing heart issues over and over again, or different things that we know that are not of God, then that's a good place for a good sign that we need to fast. Because as believers, we know that we're not perfect, but we should not be seeing these things. And it's really and truly a self-examination of ourselves. But we should not see, as believers, true believers, attitudes all the time, or anger problems, or heart issues and all those things. Not here obedience to the word, not as believers, period, but we know what we're getting here obedience to the word. So if we're seeing that over and over again, then again, that's a good place that we need to look and see, maybe it's time for me to go on a fast. Fasting is a time that we dedicate ourselves for a period where we would devote ourselves to the spiritual things and the priority of God without food. Fasting gets us ready to receive God's answer. Fasting also prepares our heart to say, not my will, not my way, but your will, your way be done. Fasting is not a manipulation that will put a demand on God and we expect God to do things our way simply because we are sacrificing or simply because we're giving up something. That is what fasting is. It is a sacrifice. It is giving up something. And we will talk more about this when we get to, we're going to reference Daniel chapter 10 in a moment. Fasting is giving up something that is perfectly good in most regards and acceptable so that we can have more of God. Fasting is a spiritual discipline that is a physical act. Giving up other things such as a computer or our phone, gaming, texting, TV, movies, anything that brings us pleasure or brings pleasure rather to our mind, our emotions, our body, any of those things. Those are things that are good in addition to fasting to give up. But the main fast that God calls is abstaining from food. And again, we'll see that in Daniel, other chapters too in the Bible, but mainly in Daniel. That the fasting mainly is giving up food. So, my thought is, okay, if we give up food, and we'll again use today. And fasting, we know, is personal. We know we do it collectively. Prayerfully, everybody, cooperates and does the collective fast on Wednesdays. But it's a personal thing between us and God. So we don't have to broadcast it. The Bible tells us that. We don't broadcast it. We don't go out here looking like we're fasting, clothes-wise, appearance-wise. We don't go out here letting everybody know I'm fasting. If they're having a party or a dinner or something on the job and the day is Wednesday or any other day that God calls us to fast, we don't have to tell nobody, oh, I can't eat because I'm fasting. Just tell them I just choose not to eat. We don't have to broadcast it, because it's kind of like we're looking for that pat on the back or to let somebody know what we're doing, but we don't need to do that. So fasting literally means to cover your mouth and refuse to eat. It is a time of spirit-led self-examination. When we fast, we will begin to see God do a deeper internal work in our life, one that prayer alone cannot do. Fasting prepares us for God's answer, regardless of what it is. It prepares us for the answer when the answer is not what we think or desire it to be. And I think a good example is David in 2 Samuel chapter 12. You know the story in the background of David. David was a king. David committed, even though he didn't personally do it, he committed murder. He committed adultery. And we know Bathsheba became pregnant, which Bathsheba was Uriah's wife. She became pregnant because of the adulterous act that David committed. And we know the story of Nathan going to David and what Nathan said to David. David basically pronounced his own punishment, if you will, and that what he spoke out of his mouth came to pass. So the child that Bathsheba was carrying was going to die. So what David did was he went on a fast. And on that fast, he was fasting for the life of the child, because this wasn't anything that the child had done. But David decided to abstain from food and fast for the life of the child. And we know the end results. The child died. Well, after the child died, what did David do? He got up and he ate. Because his servants was afraid to tell him that the child had died, because they thought he was going to react some other way. But David didn't act that way. David got up and he ate. And David, I believe from that point on, I know that from that point on, David became the better king, or the king rather, that he should have been from the very beginning. So again, it prepares us for the answer, and it may not be the answer that we want, but it's the answer that God desires. So we can't go on a fast with a mindset that we're going to go to God. We can go to God, and we can ask God while we're fasting, but don't go in it with a preconceived answer that, okay, God, this is what I'm going on this fast for, and this is what I want. Make that request known unto God, but accept the answer if that request that you have made or the desire that you have made does not come back the way that you desire, but it's the way that God knows, or the answer rather that God knows that we need. So what is the lesson that we can learn from this? Fasting not only prepares our heart for God's answer, but it also prepares us to receive the answer, even if it's not what we desire. So why is this teaching important? So our theme this year, as we most know, comes from Luke 4:19, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord, the year of God's favor. So for those of us who have remained faithful, not perfect, but faithful, we are, I believe, about to see and receive the favor of God according to his will. But we must be prepared, we must be in position when that window opens and that outpour comes. This kind only comes by fasting and prayer. So God, I believe, has a unique plan for each of us individually as well as collectively. He has a unique plan for our family and for generations to come. And again, we have heard over and over again that favor is there, and we believe that the favor of God is there, but that we must also sacrifice, allowing the Father to release the favor to a people that he can trust. And I think that is very important. So we feel like we are so ready. I know I've felt like I was so ready and I was so prepared for the things that in times past and even now, the things that I knew that I know I heard God. We know that we heard God speak to us individually about not just the promises in his word, but just promises according to his word, but to us individually. And we felt like we were ready for it. And God does not hold back on his promises. But God releases it when he knows, one, that we're prepared for it, and then he knows that he can trust us with it because it belongs to him. We're just the recipients of it. Minister Collins taught us on last week that before all these things being added unto us, which is the latter part of Matthew 6:33, that we must first seek the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then all these things, the tangible favor, those things that God has for us. There's no doubt, as we heard again on last week and been hearing all year, that God has those things for us, and they will come. But we're seeking the things. We're seeking the hand of God rather than seeking the face of God. So often we don't want to do that or do it God's way, and we have that choice. And God allows us to have that choice. But so does God have a choice to withhold that good thing until we decide that we will walk upright life and righteous life before him. Fasting is also a demonstration of a physical act of obedience. So I want to use the illustration that I think is a great demonstration to show us the physical act of obedience and the power, victory, and lasting effect of our physical obedience when God asks us to give up something. So in Exodus chapter 17, verses 10 through 12, it says, "So Joshua did as Moses had said to him, and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and went up to the top of the hill. And it came to pass, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and stayed up his hands, the one on one side and the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun." So I don't want to necessarily get into the meaning of the importance of Aaron and and we've heard that teaching before. The importance of Aaron and placing the stone for Moses to sit on, and then they were holding up his hand, though it is important. But instead, I thought this would be a good example of the importance of obedience to a physical act or physical commitment when God gives us instructions. The rod, we know, represents the power and authority. Amalek in this scripture represents the flesh. As long as Moses' hands had his hands raised and the rod, the Israelites prevailed. But when his arms grew tired and he dropped them, Amalek, or the flesh, prevailed. So two things here. One, we know that Moses was also interceding. He was praying on the behalf of the Israelites, and that the power and the authority and the victory that they had over the flesh came directly from God. However, the obedience of Moses to physically hold up the rod in his hand, that sacrifice, if you will, is a symbolism of them being victorious over Amalek, again, the flesh. So what does that have to do with our teaching? Basically, if we deny this flesh of food, along with whatever else that God instructs us to give up, it will determine our victory over the flesh, which will bring about long-lasting spiritual results. So in the denying of the food, we may feel like it, but we're not going to die. When I was studying this, it was talking about, it used the example of Jesus fasting for 40 days. And though people have possibly fasted longer than 40 days, we don't see, unless I missed it, but we don't see any other example of fasting past 40 days. But Jesus died to the flesh, and it was not only for him, but it was mainly for us. And he was showing us an example that though we might feel like it from 7 to 4, or a 3-day fast, or a 21-day fast, we will survive. Jesus being our example, he survived, so we will survive. So it is possible for us to deny this flesh of food for a spiritual breakthrough. So there are several purposes for fasting. One, it brings about spiritual discipline of self-control. And for those of us that were in Sunday school on Sunday, our teaching was on the fruit of the Spirit, and self-control is the last fruit of the Spirit. Self-control is a change in our character because of the work of the Holy Spirit in us, rather than the works of the flesh. It is also a way of showing that we depend on God alone, and we draw all of our strength and resources from him and not our natural desires. Esther, in Esther 4:16, showed us when she called a 3-day fast. She did not only fast herself, but she called all of the Jews to fast. And we know the results of her obedience, her fasting. She was granted favor for not only her, but also her people. And then again on Sunday, we heard briefly, even though the message did not center around the fasting, but Jehoshaphat in 2 Chronicles 20:3, it says, and Jehoshaphat feared, or he was alarmed, and he set himself to seek the Lord, and proclaimed a fast throughout all of Judah. And then, and the end results of that was every enemy was defeated, and the victory that was already theirs in the spirit manifests in the natural. So we got to believe that it's there. And again, we heard it on last week. The favor is there. The favor of God is there. And it belongs to us, and God is so ready to release it. But again, we've got to be willing and we've seen it demonstrated here for those of us who were here in a time that Apostle has called a fast. And we called a fast because there was a need, a great need. And we came together in fasting and praying. We were corporately praying for the same thing on several occasions. And we've seen God prevail. So we know that it worked. It's just that we got to break our will, And I believe that I know for myself, with a lot of things, there's a lot of things that I'm facing, a lot of decisions that I need to make. And for the women who were in Women's Fellowship last month, when I was in Atlanta, God began dealing with me on that. And I thought I was praying and sacrificing, and basically he used the outer court, the inner court, and the Holy of Holies. And basically he said to me that I was in the outer court, sometimes in the inner court, but hadn't really touched the Holy of Holies. And the flesh cannot prevail and thrive and live in the Holy of Holies. And that's where we as believers, that's my desire. Not for any selfish gain or any material things, but just to get closer to God. And so in doing that, that means we've got to sacrifice some things. We've got to be willing to give up some things, to push that plate away, as many times as God tells us, or forever how long God tells us, but then be willing to accept the answer. And then all those things will come to pass. All this confusion, if you will, I don't want to call it confusion because confusion comes from the enemy, but all of these decisions and things that I'm pretty sure that all of us have some things, but all these decisions and how to make these decisions, and God, which way to go and what must I do? If I put myself on this fast and not keep fighting against it, I know that the favor of God and the answers that God has for me will come through. It's a way of focusing totally on him when seeking his guidance and help for something that prayer alone cannot do. So again in Mark 9:29, and he said unto them, this kind can come forth by nothing but by fasting and prayer. So this, as we all know, this is the story of the father who brought the son with the deaf and dumb spirit to the disciples. He told the disciples what he wanted, and the disciples, the people began to make a commotion. Jesus, if you will, was in the area, and he heard the commotion going on. So he basically came and asked, what's going on? So the man began to explain to Jesus, I brought my son to these men, and basically, this is what's going on with him, and they can't help. So Jesus asked him, so what is it? Not that Jesus doesn't know, but Jesus wanted to create a dialogue between him and the Father, to make his request specifically known unto him. And that's what we have to do. Jesus is an all-in-one God. I mean, God is an all-in-one God, and Jesus is as well. But he knows, and he knows it, but he wants us to say it. That's a deaf and dumb spirit. When we can't hear what the voice of the Lord is saying, and then we're afraid to speak what God is saying. So he asked the man, and the man began to lay out the different things that the deaf and dumb spirit will cause the boy to do. And then Jesus said to him, and I want to, can somebody turn to Mark 9:23? Sorry about that. I thought I had my phone. And whoever finds that, can they read that for me, please?
Jesus said unto him, if thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believe.
Amen. So the problem in that was Jesus put a question to him, because the man's statement to Jesus was, he believed. He said, but help me with my unbelief. And what I saw in that, the powerful thing that I saw, we know the end results is that that Jesus did cast the deaf and dumb spirit out of the son. But at the same time, do we see what happened to the father? He said, I do believe, but help me with my unbelief. And not only was the deaf and dumb spirit cast out of the son, but if you will, the deaf and dumb spirit was cast out of the man. Or the issue that the man had, which was the unbelief, he then did not have unbelief in that area anymore. But it was because when Jesus said unto him, and the man made his request, he said, yeah, in this area I do believe, but help me with my unbelief. Jesus already knew it, and again, he already knows everything about us, but he's waiting for us to open our mouths and speak it. So, again, this was a, lack of a better word of explain, a better way rather than explain. It was a 2-for-1. That the deaf and dumb spirit got cast out of the son, and then the unbelief also got cast out of the father. So the disciples came to him, to Jesus, and said, basically, why couldn't we do it? And he said, this kind only comes by what? Fasting and prayer. So this kind of demon, or this kind of deep root, or this kind of breakthrough that we are looking for requires praying, no doubt. But it comes a time that a bit more than Wednesdays on 7 to 4, that we sacrifice and go on a fast and incorporate with prayer to get the breakthrough in the direction of whatever it is that we need, that we're seeking the Lord for. Physical obedience will bring spiritual release. I believe there's a connection between what we do with our physical bodies, our physical obedience, and the release of what God is ready to release in the spirit realm. In 1 Timothy 2:8, it says, I will therefore that men everywhere lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. So wrath does mean having no vindictive feelings against any person, harboring no unforgiving spirit, while they are imploring pardon for their own offenses. But for our teaching on tonight, it also means whatever physical act, when God asks us to fast, don't get angry about the instructions that God has given us. Because the sacrifice that he is asking us is only a temporary sacrifice, but it's for a long-term breakthrough and a long-term blessing. So he's not asking us to stop eating whatever it is that we're eating forever, or giving up whatever it is. He's just saying, sacrifice that unto me. Trust me, believe me. The fast is for us, that we may hear from God. But so our attitudes and our motives when we go into a fast, if again using on today, if we fast every day from 7 to 4 on not every day, but every Wednesday from 7 to 4, just because to be in compliance, or because Apostle calls a corporate fast, then honestly we might as well not fast. If we're just doing it to be in compliance. And yet we're fasting corporately, we have a fast focus, and we have a fast scripture. But I believe this, that while we're on that fast, if we're truly fasting, we're truly sacrificing, God is going to show us some things about ourselves personally as well. So we want what God wants for us, or what God has for us. And since God is all powerful, we may say, then why can't God just do it without me having to give anything up? And that is the wrong thought, that is the wrong answer, because it won't happen that way. God is all powerful, and he can do it. But just like he did with Adam, he told Adam to sacrifice one thing, and that was a tree in the garden. That was it. And because Adam did not, if you will, sacrifice that, God had already told him what was going to happen. And the end results happened because of his disobedience. So yes, God can do it, but God's not going to do it that way. So we must learn to not question what God is telling us to do, when the truth is we need this physical obedience to pray and fast. So again, as we said in the beginning, was not Jesus rather our example when he fasted for 40 days? And again, it wasn't just for him, it was also for us, and it brought about a spiritual release for all of us. I believe we are living in a season that God is calling us to a physical act of obedience through fasting and praying before he will release his spiritual reward. We've been hearing, we heard it at the pastor's anniversary. We've been hearing it since January, before that, but then we're in 2019. We've been hearing it, and I believe that we believe it. But again, I believe that it's time for us to do a self-examination of ourselves, so that when the year of God's favor, when the open doors, when the blessings, the new beginning, the prosperity, and the list can go on and on. But when that demand comes, when the instructions come, when the directions come, we cannot turn back. We can't turn it down and just expect for God to do it. There is a greater connection between the physical action of fasting and the spiritual power that is released from heaven. Favor, power, help, protection, miracles, all those things. We need to understand that when we begin to fast and pray, it is the beginning of a release of God's supernatural powers on what he knows that we stand in need of. And I believe that where God desires to take us spiritually, it is going to require a deeper level of fasting, a deeper level of praying, and as Sister Shantae shared with us on Sunday, purging. And that purging does not feel good. Those things, that's a pulling away, that's a taking away. But it's necessary and it's needed in order for us to produce more fruit, or much fruit. And we will be purged from now until either this body dies or until God raptures us up. There's always going to be some things, as long as we're in this natural flesh, that we're going to have to be purged from. That separation is going to have to take place. So doubt, worry, slothfulness, lazy, same level of prayer, same level of commitment, and all of those things has to be taken to the next level. We have got to come up higher. So in Daniel chapter 10, verses 2 and 3, it says, in those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant bread, neither came flesh nor wine in my mouth, neither did I anoint myself at all, till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled, 21 days. And then in Daniel 10, we're going to drop down to verses 10 through 12. And behold, a hand touched me, which set me upon my knees and palms of my hand. And he said unto me, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee, and stand upright, for unto thee I am now sent. And when he had spoken this word unto me, I stood trembling. Then said he unto me, fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself before God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. So pleasant in verse 2, it means desirable. He said, I ate no pleasurable or desirable food. And I think it's in Daniel, I think it's chapter 3 or maybe it's chapter 1. I'm not for sure. But he gives a list basically of what he did not eat. And basically he was a vegetarian. So that's what it means by pleasurable food or no desirable. I ate no pleasurable or desirable food. Then the angel said, a man greatly beloved. So the same word that describes pleasant, because of Daniel's fast and his sacrifice to give up what was pleasant and desirable to him, Daniel became a man greatly desirable to and by God. That's what we're seeing, the favor of God, because of the sacrifice, because Daniel gave up what was pleasurable and desirable to him. So the favor was increased in the life of Daniel because of what he did to gain God's favor. So we see the increase of God's favor on Daniel's life came from his obedience and his sacrifice. So if we really desire the unusual increase of God's favor on our life, we must go beyond the same sacrifice that we have been making for so long. So God desires to say the same over us tonight, this month, the remainder of this year, for a long-term spiritual blessing and breakthrough. And just like he said to Daniel, and he said unto me, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee. So what is it that God is personally saying unto us? What is that pleasant thing that is so desirable to you or so desirable to me that God has been and is asking for us to give up, to fast, and to sacrifice unto him? So that he may say, oh, Denise, and you can put your name in there. That he will be able to say the same thing that he said and speak those same words that he spoke over Daniel. That because we gave up that pleasurable thing, that thing that meant so much to us, it may even be not sacrificing to leave a husband or to leave a wife. That's not what God is saying. But he is saying that you would give up, in addition to the food, that you will sacrifice and believe me for it, that he will be so pleased with what we've done that he will say that he is so pleased and so desirable over us. That's a powerful word that God desires to speak over us. And that's a powerful word that we desire to hear from God. But are we desiring, will we do that thing when God comes and asks us to go beyond the corporate fast, to do our own personal fast, so that we can receive this favor of God that God is about to release unto us? And as we even talked a little bit about on Sunday, that when in Psalms 133 and 1, when the oil was poured onto the head of Aaron, and that oil just saturated his body, and it went down his beard, and it saturated down his head, and it saturated his beard, and it saturated his body, that represents the head, which is our leaders. And we know that God is no respecter of person, but because they have been faithful, that same favor that God is about to outpour on them because of their sacrifices, because of what they've been doing, their fasting, their praying, and we know that they've done that. And they don't even have to come and tell us that. We know that they're praying and they're laboring for our soul. But we've got to do the same thing. So when that favor is released, we're standing in line, if you will, to receive that same favor. But there are some things that God is asking, and he's not demanding it. And favor is, fasting is a choice. Praying is a choice. Worshiping, praising, all those things are a choice for us. But when God comes to us and he asks that of us, are we willing to do that? Are we willing to sacrifice? So we won't have any reason to get angry when that window is open, when that outpour is coming, and we're seeing different ones get their blessing. We just have to do a self-examination of our heart and our mind and our life and see what is it that God has asked me to do that I have not done. That I won't be pointing the finger at anyone else and saying, well, why did he? Or why did she? Well, she hasn't been here as long as that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's talking about, and this is a personal self-examination of ourselves. That are we willing to do that in order to really receive the favor and the blessings of God? Amen.